Tomate trifft heute hier mit Mr. Gerry McAvoy.
Good evening.
So, would you tell us please, how did you started playing bass?
Because in Belfast, where I grew up, the band we had, the bass player left.
Okay.
So I started playing bass because there was no other option. I was playing guitar at the time. I was playing guitar in the band, and the bass player was an apprentice butcher. You know, butcher, cuts meat.
Yeah.
So every night he came to rehearsal, he was covered in blood. So the guitar ended up covered in blood. And eventually he left, you know, because he went on to become a butcher. So there was nobody to take his place, so I took his place.
Okay.
Because I was sort of teaching him, you know, the rudiment notes of bass anyway, so that's the way it started. With a lot of bass players, that sort of happens. They start off playing guitar and then end up going to bass. Normally they say because he wasn't good enough in the guitar, but that's not true. That's how I started playing bass anyway.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And what was your first band?
First band I was in was a band called Pride. It was a school band, you know what I mean? A bunch of us from different schools, and we were sort of growing up together, sort of like the same sort of music, and that was it. And that was the '60s, you know. So we formed a band, and like a lot of other guys were doing as well at the same time, you know.
Cool. And what was your first bass you ever had?
First bass I ever had was a Top 20, which was a horrible thing. I think I borrowed it. The first bass guitar, there was a real bass guitar, was a Vox Cougar. Okay. Which was quite a unique old instrument. And then, luckily enough, my mother, without my father's knowledge, bought a Fender Precision.
Oh, cool.
On a weekly, you know, a lot of people did in those days, but my father never knew about it. So, well, he found out it eventually, but yeah. So the first real instrument was the Fender Precision. Cool. Which was a gem to me, you know, at that stage, you know. It cost £60. Oh. It was a 1961 Fender Precision, £60. What it was sold eventually. It was sold to a Japanese collector, funny enough. Okay. Yeah, let's go.
And you wrote a book?
I did, yeah. Riding Shotgun in the UK. In Germany, it's called a different title. It's On the Road. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell us something about?
Well, it's something that I wanted to do because I was quite close to my grandfather, and I always wanted to get stories from him about, you know, when he was growing up, and he would never expose those stories. He just didn't want to talk about it, you know, not for his own particular reasons. And of course, when he died, then all those stories went with him, and you know, and it's only in hearsay you hear from different people what was going on, you know, but to hear it from him would have been great, you know. Yeah. So I mean, I decided just to write my story, you know, and it's basically that's what it was. I mean, 20 years of that life was with Rory, so a lot of it was taken up with Rory as well, you know.
Can you tell some stories about that time with Rory?
Read the book.
Get the book in your local bookstore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's loads. There's so many different stories, you know. I mean, it's so many anecdotes. I wouldn't know where to start, you know.
How did you met Rory? How did you came together?
Funny enough, in Belfast. Well, Rory had come up from the south of Ireland, from Cork, to live in Belfast, or to live outside Belfast with his band Taste at the time, because there was a really great rhythm and blues scene in Belfast, you know, and Rory was aware of it. And he came up with a band, and he started playing around Belfast and around whatever, you know, different clubs, and we'd go and see him. And he became a bit of a popular figure. People would recognise him in the street. And there was a music store in Belfast where everybody was sort of up-and-coming musicians would go on a Saturday morning to try out guitars, if you were allowed. And it's called Crimbles in Belfast. And I remember going there one Saturday morning, and Rory was there playing an acoustic guitar. And he was like quite a well-known figure by this stage, you know. And so I sort of plucked up the courage just to go and say hello to him, and he was very kind. And he sat down with me and we had a talk for about, you know, 10-15 minutes, which was great, you know. That's the first time I met him. And then after that, the band I was with, the band that I had started with, Pride, that sort of morphed into a band called Deep Joy. It was sort of I don't know how to describe the band. It was like psychedelic rock, or at least we thought it was psychedelic rock. It probably wasn't, you know. But we ended up doing a lot of shows with Taste.
Okay.
So I sort of got to know Rory through that. I mean, not as a friend, but just enough to say hello and an acquaintance, you know. That's how I first met him.
And how it went on?
Well, we with that band, Deep Joy, we moved to London, and we were in the same stable, the same agency as Taste, Robert Stigwood agency. So we started doing shows together again with Taste in England. That was 1970, and towards the end of 1970, both bands actually broke up. Funny enough, the same night in Belfast. Yes, it's amazing. On New Year's Eve, Taste were playing at the university in Belfast, and Deep Joy were playing in the Ulster Hall in Belfast, the exact same night, and both bands split the same night. Yeah, and then it must have been about 2 months later, because I stayed in Belfast after my band had split up, because we had spent a year in London, and it was like starvation time, so I had enough. And I think it must have been the beginning of February, I got a phone call from Rory.
Really?
Asking me to come over to London for some rehearsals, because the drummer we had, Wilger Campbell, who was with Deep Joy, he stayed in London with his family. So Rory obviously contacted Wilger, and then Rory contacted me. I was still in Belfast, to fly over and do some rehearsals with Wilger, myself and him. Towards the end of 1970, Rory and his brother Donald would show up at gigs that we were playing in and around London, you know. I mean, just you know. So he was obviously checking out different people at that stage, you know.
Okay.
No, that was it, and the rest is history.
What kind of strings do you play on your bass?
Rotor sound strings. I've used rotor sound for as long as I can remember. In fact, I believe I'm their oldest living endorsee.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool. Which gauge?
I use a 45 upwards.
Okay.
Round one strings, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And some kind of effects on the stage?
No effects. I've never used effects. I used effects once. I had a little envelope filter thing that I used until Rory sort of looked at me and just went. I would make the bass go boink, donk, donk, you know,
yeah, okay.
It was like a wah-wah thing, you know. It wasn't for the Rory Gallagher band, so. No, I never use effects. I just try and do the best I can with my fingers. And
yeah, you play by fingers or you play with picks?
Both. I mean, through most of my career with Rory, I play with a pick.
Okay.
I mean, obviously coming from being a guitar player to a bass player, I still use the pick. And then when I left Rory, I joined a band called Man Below Zero, and I still used the pick. And then I started listening to old Tamla Motown, because I was into Tamla Motown when I was a kid, you know. That's the sort of music we played. And I got into James Jamerson. Okay. And I managed to find some old film of James Jamerson. Was one of the Funk Brothers who they played all the music for all the Tamla Motown hits. He was the bass player, and also Bob Babbitt was the bass player. But James Jamerson was an amazing player, and he used one finger all the time. And you listen to some of his the bass riffs he does on the Tamla Motown songs in the 60s, it's outrageous. So I just thought, oh, let me try and use my fingers again. I would use my fingers sometimes with Rory for a slow blues or something like that, or a slow song. But for the faster songs, it was difficult, you know, to keep up with just your fingers.
Yeah.
So yeah, since that, I've been. I mean, I go back and forward sometimes, you know. I use a plectrum, you know, every now and then, you know. But I enjoy using my fingers at the moment.
Okay.
You know.
And do you use a certain kind of plec?
No, I used to use a Herco, grey plectrums. That's the which I don't think you can get anymore. And also Rory used the exact same ones.
Oh really?
Yeah, the Herco grey. I forget the gauge, but you can't get them anymore. I think they're gone.
So what kind of amps do you play on the stage?
Different ones. I've got SVT, 8x10.
Yeah.
One of the old ones, you know, the old valve ones. I've got a Trace Elliott setup. It's the I can't remember the name of the things. It was the high watt copy, which funny enough I was using today at the sound check in the Bluesgarage.
Yeah.
And it blew up.
Ah.
And then as a backup, I've got a Ashdown setup, you know, a 6x10 and a 400 watt Ashdown amplifier, you know, which is great for a venue that size. Well, first of all, with the guitars, I mean, this is an old one. This is old Fender Precision. It's a 1963. That's been around. I got this in San Francisco, as you can tell on the back, with a marijuana plant. Very San Francisco. I mean, this has been around for quite a few years. I mean, I used this with Rory also for quite a few years, and this is a backup music band, which is it's really good for big stages and things like that, you know, like them. And tonight in the club here tonight, I'm just I have another amp, a Trace Elliott amp, which blew up during the sound check. So this is a setup, an Ashdown setup, which is basically the same as Trace Elliott. And the guy who worked for Trace Elliott started making Ashdown amps. You know, they're very, very good for a small venue, for a small club like this. This is really good, really efficient. No pedals. I let Marcel have all the pedals. He takes care of all the pedals. Marcel's using an AC30. This is an updated AC30. Then you can see the old Strat in the Telecaster. That'll be his pedals. Kind of has the old Pearl drum kit. And nobody plays that guitar tonight. Nobody's big enough. So basically, it's a very simple, you know, stage setup. You know, I mean, in the bigger venues we have larger equipment, but for here, I mean, this is nice and compact. You know, we try and keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Okay. What kind of amps do you play on tour with Rory?
I used Stramp originally. Back in the early 70s when we first started, I had a Stramp setup, okay, which is basically a 100 watt setup, the same as a Marshall. It was like a Marshall copy, made in Germany, made in Hamburg by an old friend of ours, Peter Struden, who's sadly gone as well. I used them for years, and then I used I started using Fender amps, which were the newer Fender amps, which I couldn't get on with, and then Marshall. I got a deal with Marshall and they supplied, it was like a massive thing, you know, which I didn't really get on with that either, you know. And then the SVT that's the dream amp, you know, the SVT and the 8x10, you know, yeah. The old vintage one, you know, cool. It's perfect.
Do you want to say something to the young musicians who start to play bass?
Well, absolutely. I mean, just it's all about sticking with it and rehearsing and practicing as much as possible. And I know it's difficult these days as well. I mean, I think it's a hell of a lot more difficult nowadays than what it was. I mean, back in the day, you know, it's a, you know, my son's actually he plays bass and guitar in a band, and he had a band going, but it's very, very difficult. It's for young musicians nowadays. I mean, I wouldn't like to be starting now, but I mean, it's all about dedication and it's a dedication and luck. Basically, if you're lucky to get good management or somebody who can guide you, you know, it is about talent, yes. But most of it's luck. I'm afraid, you know, that's
and practicing.
And practicing, of course, yeah.
Cool. So.
Check out this guy in the magazine. He's really cool.